The full interview with Jake Barber and Ross Coulthart has dropped on News Nation, and there's some gangbuster stuff in there and some very alarming stuff confirming some of Michael Herrera's information that psionic assets are used to lure in and then shoot down UFOs. So let's talk about it. Get in here. This is Jack with Cosmic Road. I talk about UFOs and the paranormal. Please hit like and subscribe and let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Yeah, it's a really amazing interview, the full interview. I was really not entirely happy with the original interview. I thought it was too edited, and there's so much connective tissue left out. Well, the full interview fills in a lot of the missing pieces. I still have so many questions. I'm not sure how much Jake can actually speak to, having gone through the Doppler process. He's only apparently cleared to talk about a few of these cases. But what he can talk about is amazing, and again, it corroborates Michael Herrera's information that psionic people with psychic abilities that the control group has brought in to do this specific stuff, interface with alien or NHI technology. They are luring UFOs in and then using that to shoot them down in some cases. But it gets weirder because sometimes they will set down on their own. Yeah, let's give a listen to what Jake has to say.
How often was it done where the objects would land on their own accord, and how often was it done that weapons would be used?
Yeah, I can't tell you how often. I can tell you that they are brought down both ways, that they are invited to land by the psionics team. Other times they are invited in by the psionics team, but then HPMs, which are high-powered microwave weapons, are deployed, and they have an effect where they can disrupt the flight pattern of the object, and when it is an object, sometimes it's not, and it can result in that aircraft being forcibly brought down.
So yeah, so why is it that sometimes they have to be brought down and sometimes they land on their own? That's so strange to me. And, you know, how do they justify shooting these objects down when they are making a spiritual connection, to use Jake's own words, just to, you know, bring them in, to establish a connection and then to bring them in. Jake says these are benevolent, loving entities, at least the conscious ones, because he makes a distinction between the higher consciousnesses that pilot the crafts and the biological robots that seem to be the gray beings, the gray aliens, or whatever we're calling them. Which, you know, many experiencers have said are more drone-like and have little, if any, personality or emotion. But it does get, of course, much more complicated because some of the grays do have personality and emotion, sometimes a lot of emotion, and some of them seem to be higher dimensional beings that are simply inhabiting the body of grays, which is, but that's a separate discussion. But yeah, it's very interesting that there are these different levels of consciousness, and there are these different levels of engagement with the UFOs, where sometimes they are, you know, shot down. And I'm very alarmed by that. Jake himself talks about what precisely we might be shooting down and what sort of consciousnesses we might actually be violently interacting with.
They, in a very spiritual nature, something like angels, angels and demons.
That's what the psionic people were interacting with, which was spiritual entities. What they perceived as spiritual entities, they would describe them as angels and demons. So very interesting. Jake says he's only had positive experiences, and he dealt with this loving, feminine entity of some sort. There may have been the consciousness piloting the 8-gong craft. And by the way, he says there's more than one 8-gong. He also talks about the similarities between the 8-gong and the craft that Michael Herrera saw in Indonesia, which is really interesting because Mike is under the impression that that was a man-made object. It was certainly human operated, if nothing else, and very possibly man-made. I think Mike was talking about seeing the rivets on this thing, and it seemed very man-made. So if that's something similar to what Jake saw, why was there a, you know, as he puts it, a goddess-like entity inhabiting it, and that was the consciousness, powering this vehicle? And it's so weird. The UFOs are so weird because even though many of these objects seem to be alive in and of themselves, there's a consciousness inhabiting them. They still require often a pilot, an outside consciousness to direct them. It's so strange. And I've heard some experiencers explain this because many experiencers have actually piloted the UFOs themselves. Grant Cameron wrote a book on this, detailing various cases where experiencers, abductees, contactees had piloted the UFOs. In some cases, like Dolly, like the experiencer that Preston Dennett has spent so much time detailing her story and had her on his show many times. That was like her main gig when she was with the beings, was piloting the craft. And anyway, so it's really interesting stuff that Jake is dropping here. Very alarming stuff, shooting these objects down. And especially since they seem to be benevolent, loving entities. Although Jake does say that there are negative entities and that the psionic assets, the psychic people, were also interacting with what they perceived as demons. Wild stuff, guys. And I think that now we know that David Grush played such a large role in bringing this information forward, and that Jake and his team, or some of his team members, may well have been some of David Grush's 40 plus witnesses and whistleblowers. I'm hoping that will solidify Jake's information as solid in the minds of a lot of skeptics who were very skeptical and doubtful of Jake and his information, and even throwing Ross Coulthart under the bus along with it. I think that the reaction to Jake's, information has been very negative, unfortunately. But maybe now that it's been revealed that David Grush did play such a large role in bringing this forward, people will take it more seriously, because I think that maybe a proper way to look at this is that Jake is what we're getting because of David Grush. David Grush was our gateway. He was the investigator finding out this information and then, bringing these names forward. In some cases, even bringing the people forward, like Jake, to reveal their own stories. So David Grush is our gateway to Jake Barber and hopefully many, many others. But unless people treat Jake respectfully in his information seriously, and at least take what he says under consideration, and again, respectfully, I don't know if we're going to get as many other witnesses and whistleblowers coming forward. So I hope people start treating Jake and Ross with the level of respect that I think that they deserve, and the kudos that they deserve for coming forward with this. I think this is amazing, jaw-dropping information. I understand people having a knee-jerk reaction against it. It's so out of left field to many people. Now, to experiencers and serious researchers, they're going to look at this and say, yeah, this fits a pattern that I've seen again and again. This has the ring of truth to it. But to people who aren't that deep in it, this is going to sound so weird. Talking about psychics and spiritual connections and all the other stuff. But that's the way UFOs roll, guys. UFOs are funky, guys. That's the way it is. UFOs are trippy. Once you start looking to UFOs, it gets really trippy or really fast. But if we're ever going to understand UFOs, we need to try to at least open our minds to embracing the totality of the UFO subject. And that means trying to understand, interact with, or at least acknowledge the existence of what I call the greater phenomenon. UFOs are but one subset of what I call the greater phenomenon. And it's not even a distinct subset. It is baked into all the other stuff. Like Jake and his 8 gong. You're retrieving a UFO one moment, you're interacting with a goddess the next, or whatever she is. So I really appreciate Ross and Jake and his team, and Lieutenant Colonel Blitch, and everybody else involved in this. David Grush, of course. I think this is amazing, important information, and there's so much to unpack and to dive into. But there you go. They are shooting down UFOs. They are luring UFOs in. They are shooting them down. I have so many questions about this because they seem to have had UFOs for decades. Why are they still feeling the need to shoot these objects down, to retrieve the technology and reverse engineer stuff when they seem to have had craft for many years? So that seems to indicate to me that there are different factions doing different things. And it's probably been that way for a long time. Jake talks about in the private sector how there were two competing groups that he worked for, and they may have been antagonistic to each other, seeming to confirm, maybe some of the John Stewart information, the JSOC, Lockheed firefight, and so on. I think that that's a real thing that really happened, and that things like that have probably happened a lot. I call it the UFO control group, but there's really groups. There's probably, I don't know how many groups there are, but there's probably a lot of different factions doing a lot of different stuff. And they're not all friendly with each other. So yeah, just so much to unpack here. Great stuff. I highly recommend everybody to check out the full interview. It's almost 3 hours long, but it's well worth the time. And I will definitely be talking more about various pieces of information that he's been able to bring to light, because it's, again, so important and so valuable. So let me know if you've checked out the full interview, then what you think about them shooting these objects down and using psychics to lure them in, and why sometimes these UFOs will set down voluntarily and other times they are having to be shot down. Or I say having, they don't have to shoot them down, but they do shoot them down. So yeah, let me know what you think about it all in the comments below. Like and subscribe. There's plenty of other videos on the channel, and I'll see you guys next time. This is Jack with Cosmic Road signing out.